There's something magical about survival horror games from the PS1 era. They can be clunky as hell with the fixed camera angles, tank controls, stiff combat, crappy graphics. It sounds like a recipe for disaster, but there's an X factor to them that always has me going back. This is no exception for the PS1 survival horror game that I just experienced for the first time, Dino Crisis. I got into the early 3D survival horror genre well after it was out of style. I was introduced to Silent Hill 1 back in 2010 after games had moved on to over-the-shoulder free camera style type gameplay with titles like Resident Evil 5, Dead Space, and for better or for worse, Silent Hill Homecoming. Maybe it's because I had a very minimal experience with the genre before playing Silent Hill 1, but there's something about this style that grips me. What looks and feels like low quality today almost enhances the experience in my opinion. Fixed camera angles can disorient you and make it more difficult to avoid enemies, which yes, can be frustrating, but also adds to the fear of encounters. But this also acted as a way for developers to plan for specific moments to scare the player by hiding enemies off screen, leaving only the sound of it approaching, causing dread and anticipation about what could be lurking just out of sight. The offbeat voice acting and pixelated graphics almost have a way of enhancing spookiness by leaving your imagination to sort of fill in the gaps of the game's limitations. So by 2021, I had played quite a number of old school 3D survival horror games, including Resident Evil 2 and 3, and every Silent Hill game that's worth playing. This year marked my first step into the Dino Crisis series. Dino Crisis 1 was developed by Capcom in 1999. As far as the concept of the game goes, if Resident Evil and Jurassic Park had a baby, it would be Dino Crisis. Set in 2009 on a research facility on Ibis Island, you play as Regina, who is a member of the Team SORT, the Secret Operations Raid Team. The team sent an agent Tom to investigate the island, who reports back that Dr. Edward Kirk, a world-renowned scientist who had been presumed dead for the last 3 years, is actually not only alive, but leading a secret weapons project on this island. Your main objective is to find Dr. Kirk and learn more about the weapons project. What transpires is an unraveling of a wild sci-fi experiment gone wrong with an island now inhabited with dinosaurs. The gameplay and controls are near identical to RE3. Gun gameplay is basically lock on and shoot with a few added mobility improvements. The enemy dinos are a lot more aggressive and smarter than zombies you'd find in RE games or creatures in Silent Hill. You'll mostly be dealing with raptors through the majority of the game. They don't go down easily and will even follow you through certain areas if they're not dealt with. Aside from gunning them down, there are certain laser walls that can be activated to barricade them and help you conserve ammo. The only other enemies aside from raptors are these other raptors and pterodactyls, as well as the big bad T-Rex. The way they handle the T-Rex as an enemy I thought was very well done. You never know when it will pop up next, and each moment is very memorable. The only downside is that it goes down pretty much the same way every time. When its mouth opens, shoot. A precursor to RE4's QuickTime events, we have these danger sequences, which are cutscene moments where you basically just mash every button and hope you did enough to not die. This one definitely caught me off guard, as I always thought RE4 was the game that really popularized this kind of feature. I thought it was a nice addition. It could have easily been overused, but I thought they spread the sequences out nicely. The inventory system is a nice blend of Resident Evil and Silent Hill's inventory philosophies. In Resident Evil, you're very limited in both ammo and key items that you can carry, whereas Silent Hill lets you carry pretty much everything all the time. Dino Crisis is a nice mix between the two, where your ammo and health items are something that is limited in what you can carry at one time, but key items such as ID cards or anything that would unlock a door is in this unlimited key item space, which is definitely a welcome change. This nice middle ground allows for some strategy in your inventory selection without the same frustration of past Resident Evil games where you couldn't progress because you forgot to bring a specific item. On the topic of items, a welcome addition is the resuscitation, which essentially acts as a do-over if you die. I was able to find enough of these bad boys to avoid ever getting a game over. This helped make progression a lot smoother, and I never felt like I had to redo any major portions of the game. A major type of item you collect during the game are DDK items. They are all associated with a letter such as S, and you have to collect 2 pieces of each. Though most of the time you only have to worry about no more than 2 letters at a time for these DDK items, it can get a little confusing remembering which door is associated with which letter. It made me realize why other survival horror games sometimes use very obtuse items as keys such as a crank, because it can actually make it a lot easier to remember where you need to use it. When I heard the concept of Dino Crisis basically being Resident Evil but dinosaurs, I really thought this was going to be an action-packed game. What surprised me was how puzzle-heavy the game actually was. The previously mentioned DDK items all unlock doors, but a puzzle must be completed each time. They start simple, but each one gets a little more complicated. There's a lot of notes scattered in the facility. Many will have important information that you'll need to write down. When I say write down, I mean grab a pen and paper, because it's one of those types of games. I had quite a few sticky notes filled with codes and puzzle solutions by the time I was done with the game. The puzzles were definitely one of the game's strong elements. Not every puzzle was simply find a code on a note and use it at door XYZ, though the game definitely has a healthy dose of those too. There were some more intricate puzzles such as layering plates to create a certain pattern, and 2 crane puzzles which might be frustrating to some, but I actually found them to be pretty fun. The one puzzle that did really annoy me a little bit was a Zelda-like block pushing puzzle where the pathway to the end was just off screen. If you did it wrong, you had to go all the way back out and leave the room just to reset it. The story and characters were well done for a game of this era. They don't get too heavy into the story, but there's definitely enough technical jargon and craziness going on to buy into this crazy sci-fi horror scenario. Much like other games of the genre, they stick to a small number of characters. I think all the characters have something going for them and are actually pretty well voice acted considering the time period. Regina is a strong-willed character and doesn't take crap from anyone. Rick is the likable tech guy who is always moving to the next control center to help you out. Gale is the typical military guy who's a hard ass, but without spoiling the story, they add an extra element to him that I really didn't expect. Overall, Dino Crisis is a very solid horror game from the PS1 era. From a gameplay perspective, it strikes a great balance between inventory decision-making, action, cinematic moments, and complex puzzles. With that being said, I'm a little curious why this series is not mentioned in the same breath as Resident Evil and Silent Hill. From a technical standpoint, I think the game can stand toe-to-toe with both series. I think the biggest reason might just be that the lore and world building for both Resident Evil and Silent Hill really just had fans more invested. There are a few other flaws with Dino Crisis, such as progression issues where pacing can really slow down, and just not enough enemy variety, but overall this is still a great game worth playing if you're willing to accept a bit of the clunkiness of games from this era. This of course was not the end of the Dino Crisis series, and I definitely look forward to playing the sequels sometime in the future. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.